Hi, I'm Антон Гопка. I'm the Dean of the School for Technology Management and Innovation here at ITMOTECH University. And today we'll be discussing the most exciting topic. As we, at our school, we normally teach how to disrupt existing markets. There are many new markets actually coming, which may change our economy completely. And today we'll be discussing exactly these largest, huge markets, which are really like coming onto us, and we have to react to that somehow, and have to integrate into these new great markets, great opportunities, potentially threats. That's something we'll be discussing today. And today I have a few people with me, which are great experts. We'll start talking today about biology and some synthetic biology, which is, somehow you combine the artificial and life, actually living organs, living organisms, but also and I will be speaking to this topic myself, and I'll present myself later on. We also have here people who will present the new space, and the new space is the new space. So it means that the old space is behind us, and now we're looking into the new space, and I'll be joined by two people. One of those is the guy who is the managing director of our space tech at our school, and then we have a guest here from a startup, for actual startup in the space, and finally we have a friend of ours and who is responsible for creative industries at our school. And I'm asking now to present each of us to the audience. On my side, hopefully everybody knows me already as a dean. I'm presenting a lot. But I'm, in addition to being a dean at the university, I'm a venture capitalist, investing primarily in life sciences. So I do a lot of investments into biology, and specifically into the synthetic biology. We have 4 companies, actually 5 now, going public on NASDAQ. And a lot of companies being sold, and a lot of value actually created in these companies for patients. Obviously, these are potential cures for cancer, potential actual solutions for some industrial problems as well. And now we'll talk to that just in a minute. So, and now further on, Dmitry Borисov, please.
Thank you, Anton. My name is Dmitry Borисov, and I'm a professional consultant and manager. Been working in deep tech industry most of my career, specifically in ICT, info communication and telecommunications. And I've been studying, working, and living abroad in many countries, and getting international experience. And finally, joined ITMO University, and specifically the School of ITMOTECH, as the managing director for our new Space Tech master's program. And I'll be happy today to talk about the new space. And another colleague of mine, Dmitry, another one, is joining on the same topic, but he will talk about his personal experience first of all, and from, let's say, in the same topic from a different angle.
Okay, I'm Dmitry Oliferovich. I'm Chief Marketing Officer at Orbital Express, a space shipping company. We're a startup, a space startup, so I'll be happy to share my experience of being in a startup and looking at this disruptive new space industry from the inside. I also am a member of the Federation of Cosmonautics of Russia, a non-commercial space popularization organization in Russia, and I'm a space journalist, lecturer, and space motivator as well. Thank you.
Great. And Maria? Maria is coming online today. Hopefully
Yes,
see her well.
hello everyone.
Yes, hi
It's
Maria.
a great pleasure to be here, at least online. That's still good to see you all. I'm Maria Kupcova. I'm heading creative industries specialization at ITMOTECH. I'm working in the fields of design innovation and technological art. And recently I was thinking about, like, it's every time a problem how to call yourself. Like, everybody's asking Maria who you are, and then I said, okay, I'm a meta artist, an architect for non-human. So that's a new underline for myself. So I'm also a research associate at the University of Innsbruck in Austria, and complete nomad traveling between the thousands of cities and the countries, doing lots of crazy projects that I will describe later on today. Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks. Great. Yeah. So let me start with the biology, because we've seen here actual revolution, which is normally called genetic revolution, but there are some specifics into that. So I'll talk about that a bit. Hopefully, everybody sees my presentation. Generally speaking, I'll start with the markets essentially. And in terms of the markets, we're seeing that one of the questions actually which is always raised around these new technologies is whether there's actual liquidity, whether there are really many companies doing that. And if we talk about you, and some of you I know are like students or thinking how they will develop themselves professionally, there's always a question mark if it's actually feasible to get your role in this whole story. So today I'll actually speak, and hopefully every actual speaker will talk about how large this segment is, how large is this kind of emerging market, which was never before, and how you can actually participate in that. So we'll start off with biology. And the biology, I would say that in the last, say, 20 years, there was a lot of investment done in IT space, and IT obviously was the largest chunk of venture investments. And now it's changing. I think that currently we are at the same point as 20 years ago was for IT, and biotech will develop really exponentially. There's already the amount of venture investments coming to life sciences space is actually equal to the investments into the IT, and this was never before. It actually happens right now. Here you see in this chart on the left, on the top, that the life sciences segment and software are two largest chunks of venture investments, and we'll see a lot of coming out of these two sectors. In the biopharma space, from this segment's perspective on the right, there's 2/3 of all the investments come into biopharma. And I'll talk primarily today about biopharma space. It's pharmaceuticals, some new therapies, which hopefully will cure some of the incurable diseases. And then about liquidity. There are really a lot of companies now, like tens of thousands of companies. It is essentially it's a new market, and there's some specific services for these markets. And of course, for you as a professional, you can join one of those 50,000 or many more actually companies. And over the last 7 years, the biotech space, you see this chart on the left, on the bottom, the biotech space produced more IPOs than the IT space. And last year, 2020, was essentially a situation where at the beginning of the year, we thought that the venture investments would decline, the IPOs would actually crash, and this was almost happening in March. But later on, of course, because of those money which was kind of flooding into the economy everywhere, we saw that in the end, the amount of IPOs in biotech space was twice as many as the IPOs in the IT market, and so it was already 2 times more. And we're seeing that the trend is there. And of course, there are fundamental factors for that. The obvious fundamental factors, which are not changing for the last many years, essentially, is that the population is aging. It's pretty clear. And whenever we age, we essentially spend much more money on healthcare. As one case. And if we talk about people who are over 60 years, there's already over 1 billion people in the world which already reached 60 years, which means that they need healthcare. And also it's important to understand that these people are coming from the rich countries, so they have funding to fund further innovation, and they are seeking, of course, for new cures. On the other side, the developing countries are like really, they are growing in terms of population a lot. So like these two fundamental trends make it the case that the healthcare markets would grow. But there's another case, and I think which is also not like less important. These are technologies. There are completely new technologies which are coming to the market, and I will show you the 9 new major technology advances and essentially new ways how you can treat diseases. And so, of course, the most hyped one is, of course, the gene therapies. And gene therapy, now we understand how our genome works, almost. But this was done back in 2003. We finally deciphered our genome. There was a human genome project, which was finalized in 2003. And we hope that we will cure any disease actually with that. This didn't happen anyway. But only in 2017 we finally managed to approve first 2 medicines based on gene therapies, based on like really gene editing. And these were done by Juno and Kite. Both companies were successfully sold to big pharma players, one to Celgene, the other to Gilead, for 9 and 12 billion. And this was really amazing. They managed to cure 80% of incurable cancer in children. And these children were essentially, they were dying. It was like weeks before they would die. They were terminally ill. We tried all the chemotherapy, whatever tools we had, and it was totally incurable. And all of a sudden, there was like this CAR T therapy, which uses gene therapy. And then there was just one girl which was cured, and she's still alive. And she's, of course, ambassador for this gene therapies, Emily Whitehead. But then, finally in the clinical trials, which was like less than 100 people anyway, but there were 80% which were really cured. But gene therapies, the problem with that is that you can change the genes, but then it's difficult to change them again. So there's no technology for that so far. Hopefully at some point we'll have that as well. But the first generation of gene therapies, they were doing ex vivo gene editing. So they were not changing all the genes in the human. They were just changing some cells, specifically immune cells, and really reprogramming them to essentially fight cancer. The next generation of gene therapies would change all the genes in the whole human being. And this is really, really threatening and really dangerous, I think, because again, you don't have the tools to do the undo, what you can do in the office. So here, essentially, we have already a lot of therapies which are quite developed and hopefully would be approved within the next years, really soon, which can cure, firstly, some ocular diseases. And why ocular? Because in ophthalmology, if you inject something into your eye, it doesn't spread systematically. So not spreading to through the blood to all of your organisms. So that's why first gene therapies, which will actually amend genes within actual life organism, would be probably ocular therapies, which will which will cure blindness. It's amazing. This will happen. It's essentially a miracle. So hopefully this will change. But then the other therapies, which I think are even more promising, is RNA therapies. You know that the kind of the central dogma of molecular biology, where you have the genes which are then moved to RNA, messenger RNA, and then translated into actual proteins. So now, if you can actually silence or stop some RNAs and make them not producing any proteins, you can actually switch on and off kind of a gene, essentially. So you can stop some protein being producing, stop some pathological process in the human being. But then once you stop injecting the drug, it gets back to the same process. You're not amending any genes and you're not doing anything which you cannot amend later on. So these are RNA therapies. The most famous one is obviously Moderna. And I spoke just this week actually to some of the best guys who actually co-founded Alnylam. Alnylam is another player in RNA space, and he told me that back in November he was thinking of making a short position investment into Moderna, because he expected that Moderna would fail, and that's what we would expect, because Moderna is a completely new therapeutic modality. When it was the RNA vaccines were never used in humans, never before. And all of a sudden it made 95% efficacy, amazingly, 95%. And all the traditional vaccines, traditional ways how you produce vaccine didn't work that way, and they were actually less efficient. So, and he said, yes, this was a complete miracle. Nobody believes and nobody understands how it actually works, to be honest. That was his words. But anyway, it works. We see this in the huge clinical trials. We still, of course, are monitoring all the effects. Obviously now we think that the benefits are better, of course, than the threats, hopefully, because we're living in the pandemic situation. But still, this is really a breakthrough. And of course, Moderna could create vaccines against cancer. And this would be a huge perspective and huge development. Then the other ones, 3 more. One is microbiome. So this is something which is still untapped, and I think this is a major opportunity. And we're talking about some bacteria which live in our guts. And these bacteria actually sometimes, we make a joke among investors that potentially human being is just a vehicle for bacteria. And it's very, very helpful because it's a good vehicle, and it thinks and helps to feed bacteria, because we eat and they get this as food. And just that the number of cells, if we treat bacteria as cells, they are 3 times more than the cells in the actual human being. So potentially it's just bacteria, not us, and we are just a vehicle for them. So the microbiome, this whole set of bacteria which live in us, they actually control our minds, they control many things actually, and potentially working and controlling them can help manage such diseases as depression, as obesity, and schizophrenia. Something you would never think that this would be bacteria which actually can cause that. So that's microbiome, and we see a few companies. One went public quite successfully. Ceres Therapeutics actually went down. It was just a few weeks ago was almost 2 billion. Now it's 650 million. I just updated this presentation for you. And now the synthetic biology, which is completely really exciting thing. Essentially, it's creating living organism from scratch. So you can actually create a DNA. A new DNA, and then really apply this to the embryonic cells and actually create a new organism. And this all what I'm talking about, this all is either approved or very close to approval. Specifically in synthetic genomics and synthetic biology space, what you can do already today, you can raise pigs with human organs, which can be transplanted to humans, and there will be no graft versus host disease. So this will not be rejected. This new organ, which was actually raised within a pig, would not be rejected by a human. So this is amazing, and hopefully this will work. And that currently there's a huge queue for organs, and this is a major unmet need, but hopefully this will change with synthetic biology. And there are many other applications. So for example, you can create mosquitoes which will not carry malaria. And with that, when you actually put these mosquitoes into the world and they spread, and they can replace the malaria mosquitoes, and then you kind of essentially, you don't cure malaria, but you make that everything is the same, the same mosquitoes, but they do not no longer spread malaria. And this would be amazing. This actually is being done already. So this is all feasible, and this is it's happening now. And finally, electroceuticals. In the biology space, electroceuticals is very exciting because we never try to essentially use the power of the cells and there's always, some voltage within the human, and if you can actually control that, then you can do many things, like rehabilitation after insult. This is just one application, but we know that there's a Neuralink company which was co-founded by Elon Musk, which is trying essentially not to read the information which we have in our brains, but actually to write it. So this is something which is happening also now. Fundamentally, this is a bit early, and we see that there's no fundamental science which will actually make it possible to write information into the human brain. We still don't know much about how the human brain works, that much at least. But still, this is being done right now. We see this. We already saw a primate working like that, like in reading the information from the brain, and hopefully at some point this will help us cure PTSD, like the post-traumatic stress disorder, and some other major diseases which are currently incurable. And finally, a few words about digital. Digital also changes a lot in the way the pharma market is being developing. We have the ability to essentially diagnose at early stage cancer with some of the companies like Grail, which is very famous. Also, there's a possibility to develop drugs based on AI technology, and this will make it much faster. We saw already that you can actually speed up the development of a drug to make it not 10 years for vaccine, but just less than 1 year, like 300 days. The Moderna drug was developed, but with AI you can do even better. And finally, digital health one. This one shows that there are a lot of diseases which can actually be cured by changing our behavior, by changing how we move, how we react to things psychologically, and these are potentially some of our addictions, like opium addiction, opiate addiction, and some others. So these are the first things which are being developed, and we'll probably talk a bit about addictions at our creative media once we move to that. So now I'm finishing that, and I want to show you that all of these things are new. These are new modalities. If we talk about cancer, there was just chemotherapy, radiology, and of course surgery, and that's it. There were just 3 modalities. And now we're seeing a lot of other modalities which are coming, and I can tell you that we will see some of the types of cancer being treated and being made chronic diseases. The incurable cancer will become chronic, and then from chronic we'll get to curable, to complete cure, just within the next 5 to 10 years. And so these are changing things. And now I want to talk about new space, and I want to give word to Dmytry. And I think that we potentially will need to change ourselves biologically to get into space, potentially, but we'll discuss first how we're right now approaching space. And then we'll probably get back to biology later when we have our question session. So please, Dmytry, here's your clicker.
Thank you, Anton. But before I start, I would like to actually ask a question for you.
Sure.
I mean, looking at the list of technologies and these really disruptive advances, it actually looks scary to me. I'm not a professional in this. I'm by all means a real amateur. But looking at the current situation with pandemics, and there are some rumors that the actual virus was not really a work of nature,
right,
but of someone else, and it just leaked through all the security measures that were supposed to be in place. But looking at this is even beyond this, I would say, simple coronavirus that we are dealing with now. So how do you actually make sure that things don't go awry and we don't end up in something worse than we're facing right now?
Yeah, that's a great question, and actually it relates to all of our sectors which we're discussing now, because everything becomes much cheaper. The new space, the old space was very expensive, so you really you need for that like a lot of money. Now it's everything's democratized, right? So democratized. So essentially now or like atomic bomb, or like you cannot do atomic bomb like sitting like somewhere at home. But now with these technologies, you can actually make a virus sitting at home because it's very straightforward. You can actually order production of a DNA like with synthetic biology. There's the Twist Biologics, which I showed you on the slide. The company, you can go to the website, you can send to them the sequence of DNA, and it will show you how much it costs, and it costs not that much. And this will produce to you, like you can produce any virus you need. The virus is on, like it's public everywhere.
Well, it really is a scaremongering kind of an exercise. But
yeah, and you can send to the space some also a few things.
But once again, my question is there any way that we can actually stop the annihilation of humankind and basically to stop the apocalypse?
Yeah. So of course these tools really now becoming really cheap, and they are really powerful, and it is really unclear how we actually control them. It's pretty unclear. So it's more of on the one hand. On the other side, of course, it's a question of bioethics and the question of essentially we were able to kill people already, like for like many, like tens of years, for many decades before, and still we're living. Still, the Earth is still there, although we have more and more power in our hands. But hopefully, so yeah, it's just a matter of your belief that that we do have, of course, the power, like we have for decades, the power to essentially to eradicate ourselves, and yes.
Yeah, but you're right that before we I mean I would say for the last 50 years we could easily evaporate ourselves.
Yes,
from
and
the surface
destroy
of
the Earth easily. So we haven't done that yet.
It was quite expensive, and there were a lot of things that need to be done in order to do that. Now these things are getting cheaper and cheaper, and that is quite scary.
Yeah, let's see how the space is getting cheaper.
Yeah, and I believe that speaking of spaces could be actually one of the ways out of this.
Yeah, we need to change the planet, right? Yeah. We need to go to another planet, you mean?
And that's part of the reason we're talking about this, because basically what we're discussing today, and biotech, creative technologies, new space, some other ones, they are all part of Industry 4.0. And we are in the middle of the fourth industrial revolution. These things are actually something that we have to consider, not theoretically anymore, but really practically, and this is exactly what's happening. What does it mean for us? Well, lots of implications. First of all, we're going to lose jobs, a lot of us. We have to study, we have unstudy, and we have to restudy again. We have to learn things, we have to unlearn them, and then relearn them again. And part of the reason we're here today in ITMO University at ITMOTECH is because we're launching this new deep tech or innovation management courses or tracks in a master degree program, and we're building this because we understand that it's not just technology itself, it's not just the entrepreneurship itself, it's not just the innovation, but it's a combination of those things that actually make sure that we as the humankind will be able to survive, will be able to progress, and hopefully not to kill ourselves. And today I want to talk specifically about new space, but I would like to talk about this from a certain angle, from a certain perspective. And this angle is what I called is a deep tech beyond frontiers. Why deep tech? And basically, what is a deep tech? Well, you can create any company these days, and it's getting more and more, I would say, easy. It's getting less and less complicated to build such company. However, when you talk about deep tech, there are two specific parameters that are applicable to this specific term, and only a combination of those two parameters can actually create a deep tech company or industry itself. What are these? First of all, these are R&D risks. What's an R&D risk? Basically, it's the risk of your idea that is just not going to work. It takes time, science, research, development, and a lot of investment and time to create something, not just another application, not another copy of Facebook or TikTok or some other hyped up platform, but to create something that has deep knowledge of technology and deep level of science knowledge behind. And when you create a company like that, then at the end it may not work. You have a great idea, but is it possible to make something feasible out of this great idea? That's the question. Another dimension is what they call the product market risk. What's the product market risk? It's basically that you can create something that is really cool and is really techy and sciencey, but does the market need it? Maybe no, maybe yes, but maybe not yes, but not right now. So the question is not only make something really cool and something really technological, but to make sure that this thing actually is needed on the market, you can package it the way the market is needed, you can properly market it, you can properly sell it, you can properly put a price on it, and then sell it and make profit out of this, ideally. Or if you're a non-profit organization, to create something good for ourselves, for humanity. And so I really like this quotation by Nathan, founder of one of the VC companies in the deep tech space specifically, that for a startup to earn the deep tech, there must be a science of engineering risk in getting the idea to actually work, and assuming it does, risk in improving the market demand for that. And if there's only one, you cannot call it a deep tech. What's the major difference between just a startup company and a deep tech? Well, it's, I would say, within the area of research and development and go-to-market. Because what typically happens is, and these days, by the way, a lot of people are talking about this, what would be the recovery after the pandemic is over? Is it going to be V-shaped? Is it going to be U-shaped? But I really like the quotation by Yuval Harari. He said, in my opinion, it's going to be K-shaped. And this is exactly what's here. It's a K-shape. You know, and this is a typical regular startup situation when something you're trying to implement in reality. So you're searching for a product market fit, and then over 70% they just don't really go past the Series A financing. And that's the reality, that's a brutal reality. When it comes to deep tech, it's even worse from that perspective, because the R&D phase, it really is long. It's really extended in time, and time, as you always remember, is money. So you have to burn cash for quite a long period of time to make sure that things actually work, and you have to prove it to the rest of the world and to investors, most of all. So what would be the two parameters that actually help to overcome these risks? Well, first of all, the development of Industry 4.0 technologies, specifically artificial intelligence, and the new pool of resources, you know, because people are eager to learn something new, and we here in ITMO University here, someone who would like to help you to learn these new things. And the question might arise, why would you invest in something that is more risky than another TikTok that you can make a lot of money and, you know, live happily ever after that? Well, first of all, because compared to TikTok, you also get a lot of support. First of all, you get a support from academia, because you create an impact, you create a spin-off, you create something that we as academicians will be proud of. And we definitely going to support that. And as a part of our program, you can create your own startup as diploma or business thesis, what we call. And in fact, we actually encourage people to create their own startups. And we really embrace the idea that you want to create something new. This is why we're here, basically. Then you get the governmental support and funding. And a lot of people think, oh, government is not good. Well, it depends on the country. It depends on how you use the money. And then, of course, corporates and venture capitals. And these are some examples, by the way, some prominent examples of the deep tech industry where you have a company, a category, including satellite category, nice, in university that was the playground of these specific companies, and then grants that you use from the governments and VC funding. These are real top companies, real success stories, and this specifically in Europe. But in the US, in other parts of the world that I'm going to talk about, it's even more interesting when it comes to the situation with the deep tech startups. So, interestingly enough, that each stakeholder, each party plays its own role when it comes to taking the risks, because I'm a professional project manager. So for me, everything is a risk. And although I spent a lot of years on the other side of the border, I'd say, trying to sell things, and I understand that if you're only thinking about being a risk averse, that you're not going to sell anything. The same here. If you are trying to avoid risks, you're not going to invent anything new. So the question is how to bring the right people at the right time and at the right phase. At the phase of experiments, the phase of prototyping, go to market and grow faith. And that's a very good graphical depiction of what is actually going on and at which stage these parties are working. So now let's move to a new space. So what is the new space, basically? Well, you can look at the Wikipedia definition over here, and basically all you need to look is these three words: faster, better, and cheaper. Access to space, spaceflight technology, driven by commercial as distinct from political other motivations. So basically, when it comes to new space, we're talking about something technologically and I would say industry-wise that has to do with the commercial space most, or sometimes non-commercial if you talk about academia. And in other words, basically, all space, what we call, was driven and is still driven by governments, and to a large extent by military. And new space is driven mostly by commercial, and it grows much faster. So what is exactly we're talking about? We're talking about technocracy versus autocracy, national versus international, secret versus transparent, independent versus networked. Few large platforms, which was quite vulnerable, to many small platforms, which is quite resilient. These are the typical characteristics, but you have to understand that one cannot live without the other. And when you look at specifically what these old space and new space things are going and what is that we're waiting in the future, we have to pay attention to the things, and this is why we're here, to discuss basically what's going to happen within the next 10 to 20 years. And if you look at the right here, this is exactly what's going to happen. Because what is going on these days? Everybody's excited about launches. Everybody's excited about new small sats. Everybody's excited about the ISS future. I mean, will it going to be a new one or something like that? Also, when it comes to Earth applications, it's like Internet of Things, navigation systems that we're already using, and a lot of companies are entering this space. However, if you look at about the future, we're talking about space debris removal. And this is where Dmitriy's company is actually quite active these days, and this is what they're trying to pitch. And we'll hear from him firsthand. What is it about? We're talking about robotics, artificial intelligence. We're talking about deorbiting of debris and the actual working satellites. We're talking about green space. We're talking about production and absence of gravity, planets and asteroid mining. And of course, we're talking about things like man to Mars, energy from space, and mining on space habitats. And that's part of the answer to the question, what are we going to do and why are we doing? If something goes wrong with, let's say, Anton's field of interest, and this planet becomes uninhabitable. So I hope it's not going to happen, hopefully, because this is a very unique place for us to live. And it will take quite a bit of time to get our technologies developed by to that extent, so we can travel, hopefully within the solar system or beyond. So, and I really hope that we will survive by the time, and our kids, our grandchildren will be able to face this. But a couple of words I wanted to say about the actual landscape and the framework that you're using. A lot of people think about space only about the satellites, launches, rockets, and this is all true. However, and this is what we're trying to teach you here, there are a lot of things beyond that, such as supporting industries, training, research and education, consulting, HR. We're talking about frontier technologies in artificial intelligence, in biotech, in robotics, and our recent meeting with some top managers from a Russian space agency actually proved that they really are interested in that. When it comes to industry landscape, we're talking about a number of stakeholder groups. We're not talking only about scientists. We're not talking about entrepreneurs. We're talking about science and R&D, tourism, spacecraft, of course, military, healthcare, governmental agencies, investors and funds, markets, they're all over. It's data gathering, it's all satellite imagery, and so on. So, and of course, there are multiple opportunities and concerns, such as what if we have aliens? What if we meet them? What if we have space wars? You probably watched this Netflix series, which is, by the way, confirmed for the second series, which was quite hilarious because they were shooting it right after the actual announcement of the Space Force, the military branch in the US. So, but this is reality as well. And of course, one of the reasons we're talking about is money. We're here because we want to teach you, we want to teach people who come and join our program, mostly to create their own companies and to make money out of that, hopefully. And the reason we're talking about that's because the global space tech economy was valued about $380 billion in 2020, and by some expectations, is expected to grow up to 10 trillion US dollars within the next 10 years. So that is a huge growth. That is a lot of money. And you could be part of that journey, or someone you know. And the current situation is a bit different when it comes to Russia and the rest of the world because, of course, USA is leading the pack. However, I can tell you that the more I dive deeper into this topic, the more I understand that a lot of companies, a lot of countries are coming to this area from other perspectives and from other, let's say, parts of the world, which were not even heard of until recently, such as United Arab Emirates, such as Israel, such as India, such as China, who were in the space for quite a long time, but over the last 10 years, the expenditures and their investments in space basically skyrocketed. And many other countries who were unheard of. But of course, if you look at how much money the government spends on that, then of course it's an interesting picture that when it comes to the old space money, but you have to remember that these old space money actually come to new space as well. Because a lot of people heard, and Dmytro will talk about today, SpaceX and Elon Musk. However, few people know, of course those who are in industry know it quite well, that a lot of funding is coming from DARPA projects, which are basically military. And there were even rumors last year, after the OneWeb filed for bankruptcy, that there were rumors about the government bailout because the cash is being burned by SpaceX at quite significant amount of money, over $100 million each month. So there are risks in this industry, and there are lots of investments required, especially when it comes to fundamentals such as missions, launches, rockets, and so on. And the U.S. combined, the U.S. actually spends more money than the rest of the world combined. When it comes to space tech companies by the countries, the situation is pretty much similar. However, there are some interesting peculiarities. And one of them is Russia, by the way. We can see here it's a very small bubble with 8 companies, but Dmitry will talk more about that. There are some more of them, but we're lagging behind. And I can tell you the reason we're lagging behind is because the industry itself in Russia is I would say it's on the edge of transformation. And when I say transformation, I can provide my own experience, because when you do the transformation in any kind of industry, you talk about 3 major aspects. You talk about people, you talk about processes or business processes, and you talk about tools. So you have to change the people skills, you have to change the business processes, the way this industry operates, or this particular company, and you have to create tools. And tools could be software tools, it could be sensors, it could be the development of the industry and technology in general. But these are the 3 major elements that, regardless of the industry, have to be in place. And I've been working in telecom industry most of my career. I can tell you one of the greatest fears were and still are that especially for providers, is to become what they call the dumb pipe, meaning that it's basically a transmitter for someone else's high margin services. This is what the space industry is also trying to avoid. And I really hope we're going to witness ourselves within the next 10 to 20 years how it's going to work around the world and specifically in Russia. That's it for my part. And sorry for if I've been too long, but I thought it would be interesting.
No, anyway, it's really great. So just as one question to all the speakers. Do you still feel that space is romantic, or there's no such or already?
No, it is romantic.
It's there. Because when you say even robotics, healthcare, HR, whenever it's in the space, I feel, okay, that's what I really want to do. So robotics in the space is much more exciting. Or even, like ore mining or something, like mining in the space on the asteroid. Yeah, space tourism.
Well, like I said, I was presenting this whole industry from a certain perspective, but of course there are other ones, And I myself, for me, space is I would say, a lifelong interest. Although I've never worked in this area before, and I've never been, it's never been an area of my professional interest until recently. But I can tell you that it's been a long, lifelong passion for me. And I mean, I've been reading multiple science fiction books. I've been following all this, space events happening across the globe. I still remember my mom telling about the feeling of excitement in the whole country when Gagarin was launched back in the 60s, and this whole, I would say, this whole feeling, the atmosphere of excitement, and we're gonna have some really great future. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. People didn't decided that they have a lot of earth problems, but I still hope that we will face some really great advances in the near future.
Great, thanks, Dmitry. And Dmitry was talking about trillions. It's a huge market, really. But I want Dmitry to talk more about how you can participate in that. And you don't have to have trillion in your pocket to participate in this, because this is really democratizing, and you can actually work in the space already now within a startup. So this is actual startup in front of us. So
yeah, I was talking about something theoretical, and
so
nice numbers and slides. But Dmitry is actually the person who is working in this industry and who knows this situation and the actual things firsthand.
Thanks.
Thank you, Anton. Thank you, Dmitry. I'll try to add mine a little bit to what has been said by my colleagues here before. And yes, I'm going to sort of try, there will be some figures in my report, but I'll sort of try and step away from too many figures, too many formula, because too many financial reports, because I feel I would like to try and deliver to you the core idea about what new space is about, and to try and give you some, markers as to where you could start as a space entrepreneur, should you choose to do so, or how, and give an understanding of how space market is being disrupted by new space, right? So let's talk about some hands-on things. And first, yes, just like Dmitry has said, new space is the commercialization of space by new space players, and by new space players I mean companies that have emerged in the last 20 years or so across the world, including Russia, and we'll talk about that more in a bit. The major difference between new space and old space, as it is called, is that new space companies have predominantly been founded by space enthusiasts with a background in the industry, by people who have started out with little or no investment and have managed, in some cases, to attract investment by creating potentially market disruptive technologies and services based on space. And another feature is new space has come at the right time, or it actually could never have happened before the last 20 years, simply because the miniaturization of digital technology has been one of the key factors. The democratization of space launches has been another factor. So it has been a combination of factors that have led to a possibility to create space hardware and space software with much, much less money, involving people with very, very different backgrounds. And so, yes, the market has been growing. The figures are on the screen. And obviously, a major chunk of the global space economy as of 2020 was occupied by commercial space revenue, and that's another important thing to consider. Suddenly, things started to be sold and to be bought in the space industry by companies and the industry players who have never thought of being involved in space before. Companies like Amazon, companies like, Chinese car manufacturers, they all suddenly have, had this desire to be involved in the space race in some capacity or other. And if we look at the cumulative investment geography, we will see that obviously, yes, in line with what Dmitry has said, most of the investment comes from US startups, into US startups, and obviously this trend may change, but I doubt that it will change dramatically. But of course there are other players on the market, And as recently as just about 5 years ago, China has become a major player in the space industry, and who knows where they will take the whole, they will reshape the whole map, the whole geography of space investment in space and space startups, just to give you one example. And yeah, a lot of experts and industry aficionados are talking about the new space race being on at the moment. And the new space race spearheaded by these three wonderful gentlemen you can see on the bull here. But not only, let me tell you, not only, each of you can might get to spearhead the industry in some way or another. Yeah, and so someone else might get to ride these little rockets several years down the road. These are just the tips of the iceberg, 3 tips of a very big iceberg, and obviously these are 3 major success stories, and I'll feature 2 of these gentlemen in the success stories I'll be talking to you about today. As when we talk about this new space race, let's try and distinguish between the old space race of the 1960s that most of you must be aware of, and the new space race 2.0 as I like to call it, that is currently raging. And the old space race was obviously the one between the United States of America and the Soviet Union, and the goal of that was to put a human on the moon and get them safely back to Earth, and obviously we know the outcome of that space race. As a side effect, it has given rise, the old space race gave rise to a plethora of technologies that have found their way into our everyday lives. It has given way to several directions in the global space industry that no one had thought of before the moon race started. For example, long-duration human spaceflight in low Earth orbit surprisingly resulted from the moon race. And I could tell you much more about that, but just take my word for that. We wouldn't have the International Space Station now if Neil Armstrong hadn't landed on the moon, in a twisted way, but trust me on that. So, yeah, and we're still dealing with the implications of what happened over 50 years ago across both sides of the Atlantic. So, in the space race 2.0, the main feature, actually what you get to see if you study these slide carefully, is how many more players we have on the market. And I deliberately put the last line here, who else? Because I might have easily, some key emerging player might have easily slipped my attention. Obviously, we're talking about the USA still being a major space power, but I would doubt this, I would probably not dare say that it is the only major space power, of course it's not. Russia is still trying to hold its position as a major space player, and it's doing so with some success as well. China, we all know about the Chinese rover on Mars, the 2 Chinese rovers on the moon, the international Chinese space station that they have recently put in orbit, the core module, with an intent to attract international partnerships into that project. The China's lunar human exploration project. So obviously China is currently leading the way in a number of projects, space exploration programs, and they're looking at deep space now, planning a robotic mission to Jupiter, planning a robotic mission to Venus, etc., etc. And another pair of competitors would be SpaceX versus Blue Origin, and you should read those angry tweets that SpaceX exchanges with Blue Origin, and the feud between Blue Origin and Virgin Galactic, specifically between Mr. Branson and Mr. Bezos, the founders of those companies, and how they kind of nudge each other to go deeper and deeper in gaining more market. Obviously, there is also sort of race now, something that was inconceivable back in the 1960s, a space race between private entities. Simply because back in the 1950s, there were already space companies, old spaces they're called, giants like Boeing, Northrop Grumman, and in the Soviet Union we had obviously there were government bodies, but they were what we knew as OKB, or construction bureaus, that the famous Construction Bureau 1, led by Sergei Korolev, for example, they were actually like old space players as well, old space companies, if you think about it. But the main difference between the old space race and the new one is that in the old space race, all those space companies were contracted by their respective governments, whilst today commercial companies may not even have to necessarily secure government contracts, although most money still lies with government contracts. In the US, it's DARPA contracts, NASA contracts, and SpaceX has gained most of its cash by launching things for the US government, obviously. In Russia, a space startup will by default have to cooperate with the government to launch things to space. And that's the reality. But obviously, space companies have a much bigger, have actually seen and in some ways driven the birth of a wide commercial market for their services, and they may sell their services to non-governmental entities as well. Obviously, there's this sort of juxtaposition between China and other nations. So China tries to become the world leader when it comes to space exploration. To them, it's a matter of national pride, not so much as a matter of gaining investment or something. It's a matter of national pride. So they're mostly working for themselves, and they're also fueling this space race from that perspective too. Commercial space companies compete with each other globally, and I think in some way, yes, I'm also part of that. Okay, so there's a new space race going on, and new space is playing a major role in that. So commercial space startups are a part of that game. So, as I said, democratizing access to space is a key feature of Space Race 2.0, and opportunities in space that had previously been unthought of and were only available to governments are now available even to a rich individual who may invest their own money in space. And obviously, new space has brought along, or rather been tugging, a number of new space-based services or space-related services that simply weren't around decades, even 2 or 3 decades ago, such as space junk deorbiting, private science missions, just to name a few, space internet services, think Starlink, think Elon Musk's Starlink system, space tourism, launching objets d'art to space or objects of art. I mean, I'm citing some radical, I would say, direction, but yeah, it's also one to consider. Anything can be launched for anybody as long as they pay the money now. Previously, it was hardly conceivable. Space agencies increasingly contract new space companies to do missions for them, as Dmitry has said, cheaper, faster, and better than an old space, bureaucratic, red tape smeared giant would probably have done. And the most famous example of that is NASA contracting SpaceX to first deliver cargo and then astronauts to the International Space Station, and now to deliver astronauts to the surface of the moon as part of NASA's Artemis program. And SpaceX obviously thinks very high of it, places a very big importance on those contracts. And there's, of course, there's much more in the years to come. Several new space companies typically pursue several lines of business. I mean, I don't mean several lines at once, although they may do that, but there's just a breakdown of about 9 activities that I could think of just off the top of my head, where you could potentially make money as a space entrepreneur in this day and age. First is Earth remote sensing, and there's been some tremendous success stories of that. I think Anton has mentioned ISAI as being a very successful Finnish startup that has made, that I think has even left the startup status by now, because they have managed to gain some return on investment by this point. But when I was first researching them a couple of years ago, they were still a startup. Earth remote sensing is what they do, and today increasingly Earth-based observations, science-based observation data becomes a key decision-making factor for a lot of businesses in agriculture, in maritime shipping, for government agencies such as, for example, the firefighters who wish to keep control of wildfires, right? And they need space-based data to control that. There's many applications for Earth-based imagery, and it is sold for very good money. Connectivity and navigation services, of course, Starlink and OneWeb are in everybody's mind, I think, now. They've made red headlines. And a key feature is that the tool they're using to provide connectivity is a swarm or a constellation, as it's called, of small, sometimes CubeSat format-based satellites that are easily replaceable in low Earth orbit, and in combination they cover the entire Earth with strong internet signal. And this actually helps get the internet connection to those remote parts of the Earth where optical fiber simply was not an option. Technical testing and demonstration is actually something my company provides services in as well. So we do, anyone could approach us and say, so, okay, we've got this piece of space hardware, but before we actually put it on our satellite, on our spacecraft, we would like you to test it in actual space conditions. And this is where we come in and we do this testing for them. In fact, we will do such a mission when we fly next year. So we already have a commercial tech demonstration customer on board. Our first mission, I'll be talking about that a bit later. Spacecraft component supply. A popular myth that I'd like to debunk here is that obviously you don't have to launch things into space in order to consider yourself a space startup. Quite the contrary. In fact, there's perhaps a greater number of startups, at least in Europe, that do not launch anything by themselves. What they do, they build satellite hardware, satellite components, and parts of the ground-based infrastructure to support missions up in space. For example, there's companies that exclusively build star trackers, special sensors that help keep the spacecraft oriented along the three axes with relation to the Earth, the Sun, and the stars. So these companies supply their components to other companies that actually build their satellites, not from scratch, but based on custom-built or off-the-shelf components. Scientific experiments in space is another, privately funded scientific experiments in space, or experiments that have been, for which private space companies have been contracted to do them. For example, last year, Rocket Lab founder Peter Beck, Rocket Lab is a famous New Zealand-US space launch provider that has its own small rocket called Electron and its own space tug. He actually Peter Beck voiced an idea when phosphine was detected in the atmosphere of Venus late last year. There was rumor that phosphine could be a marker of possible life in the upper atmosphere of Venus, which is very, very habitable compared to that hell that exists on the surface of the second planet from the sun. And Peter Beck came up with this idea. He said, hey, let me spread word. If you know an entrepreneur, or you are a rich old guy who has $30 million of free money, and you would like to go down in history forever, you could fund a mission that we will launch for you, specifically to take samples of that phosphine in the atmosphere of Venus. We have the capacity for that, he said, and they do have that technical capacity. And we'll have it analyzed, and should we end up finding life on Venus, then you'll be the one associated with that, because you have sponsored the first private science mission to deep space. Again, this is a direction where I see great potential in the next decades. Rich people in contributing their own money and facilities to speed up science just because they can. And if I were a rich person, really, if I were a billionaire or a millionaire, I would definitely direct some of my money to such a noble cause. So, mission support, again, satellites don't just fly by themselves. Data that is received from them, including the valuable science return and engineering data from tech demonstration, must be collected by ground stations and then processed and then delivered to the end customer. This is where mission support services come as well. Design, construction, launch and operation of customer missions. So a lot of companies, including our company these days, they offer turnkey solutions. For example, you come to us and you're a new space agency or a new space player, or you are not a space company, you're in the car industry, for example, but you want to become a part of that big new race for some reason. For example, increasingly international industry leaders want to create their own constellations of satellites just for their own connectivity purposes in order not to have to depend on Elon Musk's Starlink or OneWeb or any other space constellation. And they might want to approach a private space company and say, hey, can you do for us a whole space program from start to finish and then run that program for us? And yes, this is also a potentially disruptive direction. Mission-related services, of course, like Dmytry has mentioned, you can even be a space HR specialist and profit from that and become a great industry player. You can do consulting services. You can be in legal space services. In fact, I know some pretty successful cases of companies providing legal support for space missions. That's important as well. And of course, a new upcoming trend that's very much on the rise now is space junk mitigation and space removal. And our company is also thinking about in that direction as well, although that will be obviously not tomorrow. And now on to some success stories from new space. SpaceX obviously is the first company that comes to mind of an ordinary citizen when they think about space. Okay, so space, private space, SpaceX. And SpaceX has been the main driver of new space for the last decade or so, and justifiably so actually, because they were, just look at the number of firsts I've listed here, and I've listed only the major firsts that they they have to their credit. Just to sum it up, and you can look at the slide and read these by yourselves, just to sum it up, what sets them apart from their competition, from most of their competition, is their vision, supported by their excellent, working, profitable business model. Because a lot of companies have a vision. Actually, all space companies have a vision to be admired, a vision to be inspired by, but few companies come up with a viable business plan, a plan that works. And 10 years down the road, we see that their plan has worked. Their plan was to work as much in alignment with NASA and the American defense sector as possible, and the cash generated by that to direct into R&D. And this R&D is what has helped them to go from cargo resupply missions to sending astronauts, became the first private company to send astronauts to the ISS under government contract. This is what has led them from the first failed attempts at landing their first station. And remember that rocket station, I think everyone remembers those funny videos of their rockets epically blowing up just inches before touchdown, to now having passed its 100th reusable rocket mission of their Falcon 9 booster. And that's sort of routine, as about as routine as to park your car in the parking lot now.
It's just a little observation. This list actually reminds me of one of those, pessimist lists. Like when you do this, then we'll talk.
Yeah.
When you do that, then we'll talk, and then you're here.
You're here.
Yeah, and that's exactly what's happening to SpaceX and a lot of pessimists around the world. And
each subsequent milestone that they get to, that they make, this skeptical "you're here" line kind of slips down and down and down and down, obviously, and the number of skeptics hopefully diminishes.
Yeah, and this is quite amazing, actually. But financially wise, you're saying that their model is
Viable, and I can
viable?
prove it with figures.
Okay,
What it's like
because as far as I know, they're burning cash like hell.
They are burning cash, but they're also generating some. And have a look. So SpaceX, by far, just see that blue bar at the bottom. And the blue bar at the bottom has been going up and up with some downs, but then going up and up progressively since 2015. And I remind you, 2015 was the first year when they successfully returned their first stage booster of the Falcon 9 rocket. And so the era of reusable rockets started in 2015. And so this is the market share by percent that they have been occupying since 2015. As you can see, in 2018, they disrupted the global launch services market by becoming the major player, outpassing Roscosmos with its Proton and Soyuz 2-1B launch vehicles, outpassing Europe with the Ariane launch family, outpassing the Atlas V Contesta, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they've actually become the market dominated.
What's interesting, because we recently discussed.
That's just one example of them being in launch services.
We just discussed with Anton, and I just looked at Q1 and Q2 of this year, and it's amazing how much market share in terms of the number of launches they're taking over. Exactly. Because the rest of the world combined is less than just one SpaceX.
Exactly, and that's a pretty old figure.
However, I'm looking at this particular chart. It's also interesting to see the Russia's share in here.
It's always red, so it's easy.
It is red, but see how diminishing it becomes.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
How it was dominant in 2013. And I'll remind you that the first successful commercial missions by SpaceX happened in 2008, and to that, before that, the situation for them was pretty grave. Actually, they were founded in 2002. And by 2008, they had been trying with very little with actually no success to place a payload in orbit. They had been testing their Falcon 1 booster, the predecessor of Falcon 9, and they had been failing time after time after time. And there's a famous saying by Elon Musk where he's quoted as having said that if we don't do this launch, speaking about the upcoming 2008 launch, we're leaving the business. Because they just didn't have enough cash to last through another year with another failed launch. And that particular launch, it went super well. It was successful. They placed their first commercial customer in orbit. And this is where the number of launches started growing up and up and up. And over the last 13 years, they have managed to become the unquestioned market leader in space launches.
Great.
30 years. Right. Something that took some agencies decades, they only achieved in a decade. Mm-hmm. A little over a decade, basically, yeah. So that makes me, just that part of their success story makes me quite optimistic about their Starship interplanetary transportation system. And obviously, as you know, Starship is planned to, as a special vehicle, as a special family of vehicles to take people to the moon, and most importantly to Mars and even beyond. And, you know, something makes me believe that they'll probably at least achieve the first soft Mars landing by the end of this decade with Starship.
Yeah, speaking of romantics, wouldn't it be romantic to fly to the red planet?
To Mars, you have your chance. You might be able to grab a ticket. Just right now, you can, if you have enough money, you can actually buy a ticket on for a Blue Origin trip to space or a Virgin Galactic trip to space. But that's just suborbital. That's not that disruptive. But about 10 years down the road from now, who knows if you could be able to buy a ticket to go to Mars.
Yeah, probably one way.
Can you tell us about your success story, about orbital space?
Sure. Okay, so if we're a bit short of time, then I'll just click through Blue Origin. Obviously, you know about Blue Origin and Jeff Bezos' story, where he made history when he risked flying on his own on the spaceship of his own design, his company's own design, just a few weeks ago, and he has opened up a new era in suborbital space tourism.
What was interesting, I guess he got so much excited after the actual flight that he offered a $2 billion discount for NASA to be able to join the lunar program as the second player. And I was just laughing. So much that, I mean, it's like, okay, it's not that we want money from you. We want to give you a $2 billion discount just to enter the whole thing.
Yeah, and the point was there's been an ongoing feud between Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, one that I've mentioned before. And this ongoing feud has actually got very, very strong in the Human Landing System program that NASA has currently put out a proposal for. So they wanted private companies to come up with their human landing system for the Artemis program. And when they announced SpaceX to be the only winner of the contest, Bezos got really fidgety, and he said like, hey, what's going on? Like, I also want to participate, and maybe they won't be able to put you on the moon and take you back and stuff. And are we talking about monopolism here or something? So obviously he got very, very angry with them, with NASA, and I can understand him to some extent, because monopoly is never good.
Right.
So what is that your company does?
Yeah. Let me click through that. Okay, so
Jeff Bezos Musk, finally orbital express. Yes.
Okay. When obviously I'm trying to be humble here. I'm not putting myself. We're not putting our company in line with the industry giants here. But this is what success we've achieved so far, and we were all incorporated last year. Although the idea of a space shipping service in Russia had been conceived by some of our founders way earlier. So what we do is we like to say that we tug sustainable space exploration. For those who may not be in the picture, a space tug is just like any vehicle that tugs anything on Earth. A space tug is a special spacecraft that is used to place satellites in their precise orbits. It's called a space tug. So at the core of our business model is a small sat delivery to target orbits by a space tug of our own design called SATCO. A small sat is a satellite with a mass of 500 kilograms and less. And a big chunk of small sats are actually made in the CubeSat format. A basic CubeSat is a 1U unit made of, which is a structure 10 by 10 by 10 centimeters. And by stacking up or stacking side by side several of those cubes, you can actually easily build your satellite like from a Lego set or something. Small sats are much cheaper to launch than ever before. So constellations deployment and replenishment is something we plan to provide with our space tug. Constellations mostly made of small satellites and CubeSats. Also the center of our business model, we have this idea of space share. Once our space tug has, and I'm describing the average mission here. Once our space tug has delivered, let's say, a swarm of satellites to their target low Earth orbits, it can function as a standalone spacecraft for a period of up to 3 years, or perhaps even longer. And it can then take several customer payloads that it has on board without deploying them to space to its target orbit, where the payloads will function. This could be a biotech payload alongside some crystals being grown, or molecules being grown in micro-G environment. Then, of course, some data server, for example, functioning alongside that biotech payload, then obviously some other payloads going along with that, and each of them will function for the period of time that the customer commissions it to function. So, for example, you can actually buy a slot from us to work for a period of 6 months on your biotech project, and then we disconnect you because you don't need it anymore.
Right.
And this allows you to cut down your costs radically, because you don't have to buy out a whole spacecraft or part of the spacecraft. All you buy basically is our ground support services, the amount of electricity we spend on you from the onboard electrical system. And basically, this is like hitching a ride in a taxi, but in space. So by this, we hope to drive down costs significantly, internationally as well. And obviously, any payloads can be launched like that, including ObJDAR, including if you want to make an artistic statement and you want to launch it to space, come and talk to us.
Masha,
then,
can you hear that?
Yes,
This
yes.
is an option for you.
Yep, totally. We talk about that. And so obviously, another direction of our business is, I would say, you may not buy a spacecraft or a time slot on our spacecraft from us, but you may just approach us and say, hey, okay, we are an emerging space agency in some emerging nation, right? Or we are a non-space company. We basically know nothing about space. Can you try and could you design a space mission from us, for a space program for us from scratch, and take us the whole way through all the phases of that, and then operate the mission for us. And of course, we'll study their case and we'll come up with the best solution. Or we might just, only advise them as to how they could build their own space program. Because a problem with a lot of space startups, again, from my experience, is that companies come to the market full of enthusiasm, full of great ideas, full of dope, and then they design and build and launch their first spacecraft. They receive some telemetry from that. Then it just goes dead up in the orbit because it runs out of its operational time. And then the companies just don't know what to do next. And this is what has ended. This is the sword that has dealt the killing blow to a lot of space startups, a lot of industry, high industry or deep tech startups as well. And so we could come in and could be advised as to how to develop sustainably as a space business. And we plan our first commercial launch in mid-2022. A couple of weeks ago, our CEO has signed a launch contract with GK Launch, Love Cosmos Launch Services, which is a commercial launch subsidiary of Roscosmos, to secure a place for us on the Soyuz 21A rocket that will launch from Baikonur with our test 3U CubeSat that has some commercial payloads on it as well. And one of them is a data server by the Russian company Renewable. It has been highly publicized, so I can talk about that. And we still have some available slots on that, so come in and hop at the last minute. Yeah.
This is really exciting, actually.
And yeah, that's the historical moment for our company. So on the left you can see Alexander Serkin, CEO of GK Launch, and on the right you can see Nikita Partsevsky, our CEO, and our biz dev, Alexander Uglov.
Okay.
Just part of our company. Yeah. So yeah, that's briefly about us. I'm pretty well aware that there'll be more to talk about as we gain more and more flight experience, flight heritage as we like to say in the space industry. So make sure to check back on us, go visit our website, get connected to us on social media, and ask me questions.
Thank you, Dmitry.
Thank you.
That's
Thank you so
amazing.
much.
Thank you.
Amazing stories, but on the other side it's very practical. And I have a commitment to make. I want really three of us actually, to have a commitment that will send something to the space. Hopefully, this would be something with biology, and of course this should be an art statement. So, and without statements, this is something where we come to Maria. So So
Yeah,
yeah.
I will try to touch both biology and the space, and I will talk about the creative media.
Okay.
And
So what shall we send to the space? And do we have
exactly.
to change ourselves to actually like become another species or whatever? So yeah.
Yeah, let's talk about it. I think actually that's what we do, you know, and when we are talking about the creative medium, we are talking about the medium which is creating the space around us itself, and our interaction with this space. Now, creating the cultural layers for this interaction, and definitely all the discourse that we heard before, and all the technologies that my colleagues were reflecting onto, is very much relevant. And I wanted to actually conclude maybe our day of our discussion today with some images and some maybe project-based discussion. And I will talk mainly about my personal vision through my personal projects, through the project that I developed with my students, professors, friends, and I would also refer to some projects which are inspiring me from the colleagues of mine. And here I'm maybe coming back to the words of Anton in the beginning, but not yet exactly. So I'm very much fascinated by the change and the speed of our technologies in the data processing and in data storage. So basically, we could imagine that here we could store 3.75 megabytes, then we move a bit larger, 2.5, 400 gigabytes. But now, Anton, here we are talking about your presentation. Now we basically are capable to program our DNA, send it to the space, to Dmitry, and print it there and start recreating maybe our species somewhere else, or maybe just using this new type of technology, which is biotechnology, which are merging understanding of digital and biological for me within its structure. And for me, here the interest starts. And here I want to start thinking that if previously, we were talking about the machines which are becoming like a processors of information, now basically the these type of rooms are becoming the machine itself. Now we're operating with such a large amount of data, which is allowing us freely interact with the digital space. And here is the projects of Habitatum. Habitatum, they are the colleagues of mine, Vadim Smachtin, Eduard Heimann, Katja Vitinovsky, and many others who are working in amazing analytical tools, which are letting us a chance to interact with our living environment. But basically now we are moving to the interaction not only with the digital layer of this reality, but also with the biological layer or physical layer. And we have all the technologies in our hands, which are capable to read the intelligence of the biological structure and start manipulating it, reprogramming it, or using for programming our digital structures. So this is my first inspiration in my work. And I think this what drives now also the creative field and gives us new technologies, new instruments, and new thoughts for further for further projects and iterations of this project. And we are starting to build on this platform, and we are designing a hybrid structures which are capable to breathe, which are capable to produce energy, which are capable to produce food. And this is one of the projects that we are developing at the University of Innsbruck together with the Ecologic Studio, which is based in London. And well, I don't reflect all the credits there. Of course, many other colleagues who are working with us. And consider it for this is a project for the Centre Pompidou, commissioned by the Centre Pompidou. And this is the design piece no, an artistic piece, which is aiming to bring a new kind of technology into the built environment, into the construction field, into the field of design innovation. Now, so think about the structure as a possibility to build from the fully recyclable materials using 3D printing technologies, additive manufacturing, and capable to interact with biological species. In this case, it's algae. It's a micro algae. It's a which is capable to breathe. So it's the most efficient species which is producing a lot of oxygen, which we are capable to use in the food, as well as is capable to produce the biomass, which could be an alternative for our energy source. So how can we develop this? And I won't be going through a lot of projects that we are developing in this field. And please check the page of Ecologic Studio, for example, and think how you could implement this type of technologies into the environment where we live, in the space, or maybe here in the planet Earth, or I don't know, somewhere else maybe. And looking into the data about the biological data on the environmental data, now we are looking, maybe I'm looking not to the space, I'm looking from the space, from the satellite. And now we are capable to use another source of, well, let's call it intelligence, the machinic intelligence, which is capable, the machine learning is capable to process much larger amount of data much faster and with much more precision, and capable to create the scenarios for the evolution of the built environment based on the infinite access to the large storage of data available for us from the space. And here we are with the synthetic landscape lab proposing some iterations for this type of development of the urban sphere. And our colleagues in London, Matthias Del Campo and Sandra Manninger, are working with the same technologies in implementing it into designing and thinking how we could basically push and create a new tools for designing the digital, like a new digital instrument for designing. And talking about the machines, of course, we do build with the machines, and we do build the machines, and we create and co-create with these machines. And this is the project of a colleague of mine. And actually, it's we were studying together in Barcelona. And this is a student project originally, which is working with a small-scale robotics. And Stuart Marks, who is also a speaker at our master program, is developing and funding the startup project, which is building up different types of the scaled robotics, which are capable to help human to navigate in the space, to navigate in the city, to create the services, to scan, to build, or you can just open up your mind and think about the possibilities how this robots, the small-scale robots, could be applied creatively. We are using similar technology for the scanning, and in order to virtualize the reality and start creating a new type of the digital space. And here I'm showing you a project and want to refer to another project, which is TerraZero. Let me show you the web page that I have open here. You should think and check this page. So we are starting to think how these machines and the possibility of virtualizing our reality is capable to bring a new type of interaction with our biological environment. And for example, Terraform's Zero project is giving to the forest or to the tree the same economical power as we could have as a government, by the means of the blockchain technology. And what if we start thinking that each tree, with its possibility to produce a little electrical inputs, or by producing the specific amount of oxygen, is capable to produce a new type of coin, an ecological coin, which could be trying to replace the current economy. I come back to my presentation. Here I am. And of course, we go further and think how we could, again, merge the physicality and digitality, and how with the use of mixed reality and VR technology, we could start building a hybrid space. I think my colleagues, you are here right straight away here, sitting now, and we are working together with Anton and our colleagues at the ITMOTECH in the idea of hybridizing our environment at the Tchaikovskого Street, and thinking about the space for the exhibition, for the new type of education, for the new type of activity, which is possibly we could do not only virtually, not only physically, but trying to blur this distance between the digital and the physical by the means of this hybrid reality, which has a presence both in the digital and in the physical means. Here are some sketches and the work in progress that we are doing straight away, and thinking how also our students might have an access to this space, and might have a personal space, and might have a personal space for an exhibition, for education, and for their own ego and personality. Vadim Smakhtin, one of the tutors in our specialization, also with his wife Daria Smakhtina, is developing a lot of projects for the hybrid and virtual reality, and pushing the field of the exhibition and events. And here is one of the projects of the Ephemera one, that developing a new type of space, which are bringing this, again, the transition of the digital and the physical. But how do we evolve now? And I think here, well, are we in the space or we are not in the space? How do we actually think about ourselves? How do we behave? How do we communicate? And what do we wear? I think there is another, or maybe the key question that I want to conclude maybe with, and show you some projects that Bernas Ferrari is doing. And she's bringing same technology that we were talking about before, bringing the ideas of the interaction between the human by the means of his or her skin. But if we think about this as an artistic project, okay, we could maybe keep it on the stage, but how can we bring it further? Anton, I know that you really love Iris and Marta.
Sure.
Specifically for you. But
Thank you.
How can we actually start to think how we could bring this type of technology into our habits, into our life, and how we could change the industry that we all live and use daily into more sustainable one, into more advanced, personalized now, and bringing a new technology, which are bringing absolutely new type of not only feeling the clothes, but also feeling ourselves, and maybe changing the way how do we behave, how do we communicate, and how do we interact with the type of hybrid space that I was referring before. I won't keep the video long, just wanted to show you some reference. And a long time ago with Anton, we were thinking, who are the people who are driving maybe this field now? So this may be a little list of the people who we refer first, but these people are definitely getting replaced by the students who are studying in nowadays, who are bringing in new technologies and new innovations, who are bringing in new ideas and pushing this type of technologies and these type of ideas to the market, and not only to the existing market, but basically reshaping the market that we have now with the new projects and with the new ideas. So basically, I invite all the students that I hope my guys and girls are listening to me now to kind of get this image and get into this image and replace these brilliant guys. I conclude with the email.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, Masha.
Thank you.
This is amazing.
Yeah, that's really amazing. Thanks, Maria. Yeah, so let me finish this talk today. So I think that hopefully you got some real inspiration and some feeling that these all things which we discussed today are really practical. So you can actually, participate in that. So it's not something like, we talk about trillions of dollars. We talk about these new markets emerging, but then it's all still quite real and straightforward to a certain degree. On the one hand. And this is what we are actually teaching here at ITMOTECH, at our School for Technology Management and Innovation, that you can actually touch that and you can create things with your own hands, with your own mind, and you can actually develop things, and we can help you go through the whole process and get into the global markets. That's what we're doing every day. So one thing is that you have to understand that you have to really be energetic, really learn a lot of many new things. But the other thing, which I think is also very important today, which you hopefully get a feeling of, is that you may have to change personally to work with all of these technologies, and you may probably even physically. Who knows? Because to know and to learn that and to be really successful in all of these fields. In life sciences, and we welcome you into our life sciences track, in space tech, which is managed by Dmytry, and then of course the creative industries, which are managed by Maria. We also have some other industries, but today we focus on these three, which are really emerging fields, and we hope you join us into this journey. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So, sir?